By dawn, 70 Apache riders stood around the dying fire, and Elias Walker thought the morning had come to bury him. He woke with frost in his beard and ice stiffening his coat. His fingers barely closed. His boots felt carved from stone. Beneath a skin of ash, the last coals blinked red, smoking just enough to sting his eyes and remind him he was alive. He had spent the night against a limestone wall, hat low, arms locked tight, while the only warm thing he owned lay around an Apache girl's shoulders. The blanket had once been gray. His mother had stitched its border by lamplight, back when her hands were still steady. Now it was thin, patched, and marked with 2 blue initials, M.W. The last thing she had left him. The last proof that someone had once called him beloved. Now it rested in the hands of a stranger's mother. She stood 10 paces beyond the smoke, straight back beneath a dark shawl, her hair braided with red thread, her face lined by sun, grief, and command. Around her, the riders waited without speaking. Horses breathed steam into the pale morning. Leather creaked. A feather moved in the wind. Behind Elias, old Moses stamped once, then went still. The Apache girl stood beside the woman, wrapped in the gray blanket. Alive, pale, her dark eyes fixed on Elias with something quieter than fear. Something earned. The woman stepped forward and lifted the blanket in both hands, not like cloth, like testimony. Elias tried to rise. His knees nearly failed. He had survived bad winters, empty wages, and towns that shut their doors before sundown. But he had never stood before 70 silent riders with his own breath shaking in his chest. No one raised a weapon. No one shouted. That frightened him more. The woman came close enough for him to see her eyes. She studied his cracked lips, frost-bitten hands, and shoulders stiff from a night spent giving away warmth he could not spare. Then she touched the stitched initials. "This was your mother's," she said. Elias swallowed. "Yes, ma'am." The girl whispered something in Apache. The woman listened, never looking away. The old fire snapped once. Smoke curled between them and vanished. Then the woman placed one hand over her heart. "By our fire, by my daughter's breath," she said slowly, "you are my son now." Elias could not answer. A man could ride half his life through the West and never hear words like that. He could cross Badland, sleep under 1,000 cold stars, work until his palms split open, and still never be claimed by anyone. Yet there it was, spoken at dawn by the mother of the girl he had found dying in White Ravine. Before Coldwater knew the truth, before Silas Crow's lie broke apart in the dust, Elias Walker stood in the cold and silence. And for the first time in years, the word son did not sound like memory. It sounded like a door opening. But to understand why 70 Apache riders came with no anger in their hands, you have to go back to the evening before, when Elias rode into Coldwater with $3 in his pocket, a tired horse beneath him, and a blanket tied behind his saddle that he swore he would never give away. Elias Walker reached Coldwater just before sundown, when the sky had turned old brass and red dust slid low along the street. The town was little more than one main road, a livery, a dry goods store, a sheriff's office with a leaning porch, and Crow's way station sitting in the center like it owned the silence. Elias rode in slow on Moses, his gray gelding, thin enough to make decent folks look twice and cruel ones smile. Nobody waved. Men outside the station measured his patched coat, worn boots, and bedroll, then decided he was nobody worth remembering. Elias was used to it. In the West, a man could be poor enough to disappear, and he had been invisible for years. He climbed down carefully, his old knee aching, patted Moses's neck, and whispered, "Just a little farther, old friend." Inside Crow's way station, the air smelled of lamp oil, stale coffee, damp wool, and tobacco buried in the floorboards. A black stove clicked by the wall, making more noise than heat. Elias set $3 silver on the counter and asked for flour, coffee, and oats. Silas Crow looked at the coins like they had come from a dead man's pocket. He was narrow, pale-eyed, dressed in a polished vest, with a smile that gave nothing away. "That all you can afford, Walker?" Elias kept his voice flat. "That is what I need." Men near the stove chuckled. Elias did not turn. Pride cost money, and he had none to spare. Silas weighed the flour slowly, enjoying the small power of making a tired man wait. Then the door opened, and the room changed. An Apache elder stood there in a dark hide coat, silver at the temples, hands empty and open. Cold air moved around him. Dust clung to his boots. In careful English, he asked for water. Only water. The silence grew hard. Silas leaned on the counter. Well as for paying customers. The elder offered a beadwork bracelet. Silas did not touch it. That is not money. The elder lowered his eyes, not in shame, but patience. Elias knew that look. His mother had worn it once, standing in snow after a barn owner turned them away. A face that refused to beg twice. Elias lifted one of his $3 and set it apart. Put his water on mine. Silas stared. So did the men by the stove. Outside, a sign creaked in the wind. You sure about that? Silas asked. Water does not weigh much, Elias said. Silas laughed through his nose, took the dollar, filled a tin dipper, and set it on the counter just far enough to make the old man step for it. Elias noticed. So did the elder. No one spoke. The old man drank, then touched 2 fingers to his chest in thanks. Elias nodded once. Gratitude did not need a sermon. When the elder stepped back into the street, Silas leaned close, his voice soft and mean. You keep feeding wolves, Walker. Do not cry when they bite. Elias packed the flour and coffee. A thirsty man is not a wolf. The room went still. Silas smiled, but his eyes hardened. Around here, we decide what things are. Elias had heard words like that before. Men used them when they had no truth, only numbers. He walked outside without answering. The cold met him sharp at the door. Moses waited by the rail, the gray blanket rolled tight behind the saddle. Elias touched it, feeling the raised blue stitches beneath his palm. M.W. Martha Walker. His mother had sewn those letters by firelight, fingers already stiff with sickness, telling him a blanket was not worth much until it covered someone colder than himself. Elias had been 12 then, too young to understand, old enough to remember. He looked toward the edge of town, where the Apache elder had vanished into dusk, then west toward White Ravine, where the trail bent between red stone and winter clouds hung low. He did not know a girl was out there. He did not know Eli was already moving faster than his horse. He only knew the wind had turned bitter, the kind that found every weak place in a man's coat, and that by nightfall, Coldwater would shut its doors to whoever needed mercy most. The trail west of Coldwater narrowed after 2 miles, bending through mesquite, red clay, and frost-pale stone. Elias kept Moses at a careful walk. The ground had begun to shine in the last light, and a tired horse could lose his footing quicker than a proud man could say a prayer. Behind them, the town lamps burned small and yellow, one by one, until Coldwater looked less like shelter and more like a row of closed eyes. Wind came down from the high country, sharp with the bite of coming snow. Elias pulled his collar up and rode on. He meant to camp near White Ravine, where the rocks cut the wind and a spring sometimes held water after dark. He was thinking of coffee, oats for Moses, and a fire no bigger than a dinner plate when he saw the first mark. Not a footprint, not a wheel rut, a small dark spot on the frozen dust. Fresh, too red to be old. Elias reined in. Moses stopped. Elias listened. The desert at dusk spoke in small sounds, brush clicking, leather tightening, a raven calling high and unseen. Then beneath it all, something softer. A broken breath. Elias turned toward the ravine. The marks appeared near yucca, vanished over stone, then returned where a hand had pressed the dust for balance. Whoever passed this way had not walked straight. Elias felt the air change in his chest. Plenty of reasons put a person alone out here at dusk. Most ended badly. He dismounted at the ravine mouth, tied Moses to a cedar root, and lit his lantern with cold, stiff fingers. The flame trembled behind the glass. White Ravine opened before him like a wound in the earth, its pale walls holding the last light in thin streaks. Elias moved slowly, careful not to sound like trouble. 20 yards in, he found a broken branch. 10 yards later, he found the girl. She lay curled near a boulder, half hidden by winter grass and shadow, one arm locked around a small medicine pouch tied with red cord. Her dress was dust-stained, her dark hair loose across her cheek, her breathing shallow, as if every breath had to climb uphill. Elias stopped. She was Apache, young, not a child, not yet fully a woman. Her eyes opened before he spoke, sharp despite the cold, and she pulled the pouch tighter to her chest. Fear came first, then defiance. She tried to sit up and failed. Elias lowered the lantern. Easy, he said. I am not here to trouble you. She looked past him, toward the ravine mouth, measuring the distance, measuring him, measuring every story the frontier had taught her about men with his face. "Are you here to sell me?" she asked. The words were quiet, but heavier than accusation. Elias felt them settle in his chest. Men in clean shirts and dirty hearts had called him poor, useless, soft, and worse. But he had never heard a question that made him ashamed of another man's face while wearing his own. He shook his head. No, she did not believe him. Of course she did not. Trust was not owed to a stranger in a ravine at sundown. Elias set the lantern on a flat rock, then slowly unbuckled his gun belt and placed it beside the light, far from his hand. "Name is Elias Walker," he said. "My horse is outside. I have flour, coffee, and not much sense, according to some." Her eyes moved to the gun belt, then back to him. "Iona," she whispered after a pause, as if her name cost strength. "Iona Red Willow." Wind slid through the ravine and shook her hard enough that the medicine pouch trembled against her ribs. Elias saw the blue at her lips, the stiffness in her fingers around the red cord. Whatever had brought her here, pride would not keep her warm. He looked at the sky. The last gold had thinned to iron gray. Night was coming fast, cold faster. And somewhere beyond those pale stone walls, a lie from Coldwater had already begun hunting her footprints. Elias knew the first rule of helping a frightened person was not to move faster than their fear. So he stayed still. He let the lantern burn on the rock, let the wind speak between them, let Iona see both his hands empty while the cold silvered the stones around them. She watched him like a deer watches a distant rider, caught between hope and danger. Elias glanced at the medicine pouch pressed to her chest. "Somebody needs that," he said. Her chin lifted. "My brother," she whispered. "Fever. 3 days." Elias nodded. No questions. No judgment. Just the truth between them. He stood and stepped back toward the ravine mouth. She stiffened until she saw he was only going to Moses. The old horse breathed steam as Elias untied the bedroll and found the gray blanket by touch. For one breath, he stopped. The wool felt familiar enough to hurt. He saw his mother by the stove, stitching M.W. into the corner while wind shook the cabin walls. "A blanket is not worth much," she had told him, "until it covers somebody colder than you." Back then, he thought she meant weather. Men spend years learning their mothers meant more than they said. Elias carried the blanket back and laid it on a flat stone halfway between them. Not too close, not too far. Then he gathered dead mesquite, broke it over his knee, and built a small fire where the smoke would drift away from her. The first match died. The second bent low. The third caught, small and stubborn. Iona stared at the blanket like a trap with soft edges. "Why?" Elias fed the fire. "Because night is coming." "Why help me?" she asked, sharper now, shaped by memory. Elias watched the flame take hold. Cold does not ask a person's tribe. Her eyes narrowed. "Men do." He nodded slowly. "Some do." The fire popped. Sparks rose and vanished. Elias took off his coat and laid it near the blanket, then sat across the fire with his back partly turned, giving her room to choose without feeling watched. "That blanket was my mother's," he said. "She would fuss at me if I let it sit behind a saddle while somebody shook from cold 10 feet away." Iona did not move. Pride held her upright longer than strength. The wind pushed through again, making the lantern shiver. Her shoulders trembled once, then again. Elias kept his eyes on the fire. He did not reach for her. He did not hurry her. He did not make kindness into a debt. At last, wool dragged softly over grit. Iona pulled the blanket to herself inch by inch, still watching him as if mercy might change its mind. When she wrapped it around her shoulders, the gray wool swallowed her small frame, and the blue initials caught the firelight. "M.W." She touched them with 2 fingers. "Who is this?" Elias's jaw tightened with the old ache of a name seldom spoken. "Martha Walker," he said. "My mother." Then Iona looked at him fully, past the hat, past the white face, past every fear the frontier had taught her, and saw a man sitting in the cold because he had given his warmth away. Elias poured water into a tin cup and set it near the fire for her to take when she wished. Then he leaned against the stone wall, arms folded, breath pale in the dark. Above them, the sky turned iron. The first snowflakes fell into White Ravine, slow and silent, vanishing on the warm stones near the fire. Iona held the blanket tighter. Elias watched the trail beyond the lantern glow, where their footprints led in from the outside world. He did not know Silas Crow had already found the Apache elder near town. He did not know a missing horse would become a story before midnight. He only knew the girl had stopped shaking quite so hard, and for that one moment, between two worlds, it was enough. The night settled over White Ravine with the patience of a closed hand. Snow fell without hurry, soft enough to seem harmless, steady enough to hide the trail behind them one pale inch at a time. Elias kept the fire small, feeding it pieces of mesquite no longer than his forearm, careful not to send a bright flame above the rocks where distant eyes might notice. The smoke smelled bitter and clean. It curled along the stone wall, then slipped into the dark like a secret that knew how to keep itself. Across from him, Iona sat wrapped in the gray blanket, her knees drawn close, the medicine pouch resting safely beneath one hand. Color had returned to her lips, but her eyes still carried the hard shine of someone listening for danger in every quiet place. Elias did not blame her. Trust was a slow animal. It came near only when no one reached for it. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The fire did the talking. The wind answered. Somewhere above the ravine, an owl called once and then thought better of it. Elias poured coffee into his tin cup, watered it down more than a proud man would admit, and set it near Iona's side of the fire. "It is weak," he said, "but it is warm." She watched the cup steam. "You drink first." He understood. He lifted the cup, took a small sip, then placed it back on the stone between them. Only then did she reach for it. Her fingers brushed the tin, careful, stiff from cold. She drank and closed her eyes for one brief breath, not from pleasure, but relief. That was when Elias saw how young she truly was. Not in years alone, but in the way exhaustion had stripped away the armor from her face. "How far is your camp?" he asked. "Far enough that I should have turned back before sunset," she said. "Close enough that my brother may still be waiting." Elias looked at the pouch. "That medicine from cold water?" Her mouth tightened. "No, from the hills. White willow bark. Fever grass. My grandmother taught me where to cut and how much to take. But I needed clean water from town." She looked down into the cup. "They would not let me near the well." Elias said nothing. Some shame did not belong to him, but it still sat beside him. Iona went on, quieter now. "A man at the station said our shadows spoiled the water. Another said if horses went missing, they should search Apache hands first." The fire snapped, sending up 3 sparks. Elias watched them die before they reached the snow. Silas Crow talks like a man who has never had to answer to his own words. He was the one. Elias looked across the fire. Iona nodded toward the ravine mouth. "He told others I came for horses. I came for water." The words hung there, small and terrible. In the West, a lie did not need boots to travel. It only needed a mouth and a crowd willing to warm its hands around it. Elias leaned back against the stone, feeling the cold press through his shirt where his coat should have been. "My mother needed shelter once," he said. He had not planned to speak of it. The words came anyway, rough as rope pulled through old wood. "North of Abilene. I was 12. Snow worse than this. We found a barn with lanterns burning inside and hay stacked dry to the rafters. The owner looked at us through the crack in the door and said he did not keep room for strays." Iona watched him over the rim of the cup. "What happened?" Elias rubbed his thumb against the seam of his sleeve. "She wrapped me in that blanket and sat with her back to the wind until morning." He stopped there. Some endings did not need to be opened all the way. Iona understood enough. Her hand moved to the blue initials on the blanket, slower this time, with something like respect. "Martha Walker," she said softly. Elias nodded. She said warmth was not meant to be hoarded. Outside the small circle of firelight, snow gathered on the rocks, covering red stone in white silence. 2 people sat on opposite sides of a low flame, born into worlds that had been taught to fear each other, carrying the same old wound in different skin. Both had been left outside a door. Both knew what it meant to need mercy and be measured first. After a while, Iona shifted the blanket and pushed one corner across the stone toward him. Not much, just enough to offer. Elias looked at it, then at her. He almost smiled, but the cold had made his face too stiff for it. "You keep it," he said. "I have had worse nights." She studied him, trying to decide whether that was bravery, foolishness, or simply the way lonely men learn to speak. My mother would not believe this, she said. A white cowboy giving away his mother's blanket. Elias looked toward the black mouth of the ravine, where the wind had begun to smooth their footprints flat. Maybe by morning, he said. None of us will believe it. Then Moses lifted his head outside the ravine and gave a low, uneasy breath. Elias went still. Iona's fingers tightened around the medicine pouch. From somewhere beyond the snow and stone came the faint sound of a horse's bridle ringing once in the dark. Elias reached for the lantern first, not the gun. The flame trembled as he lifted it and turned the glass away from Iona so the light would not betray her. Outside the ravine, Moses stood stiff beneath the cedar root, ears sharp toward the dark, old bones knowing wind from company. The sound came again, a bit tapping a bridle, a hoof on stone, then another. Iona's face changed in the firelight, not with panic, but with the stillness of fear already expected. They followed, she whispered. Elias set the lantern behind a low rock, where it gave light without reaching the ravine mouth. How many? She closed her eyes, listening past him. Maybe 3. He believed her. Some heard music. Some heard money. Iona heard distance, weight, and intent in the dark. Elias moved toward his gun belt, then paused with his hand above it. He looked back at her, wrapped in his mother's blanket, the medicine pouch in her hand, the blue initials near the fire bright as judgment. A man could solve many things with a weapon and still lose the only part of himself worth keeping. He buckled the belt, but left the holster strap fastened. Stay behind the bend, he said. If I tell you to run, take Moses east along the wash. Iona shook her head. Your horse will not carry too fast. Then he carries you slow. And you? Elias pulled on his cold coat. I will talk. She looked at him as if talking had ever stopped a hungry lie. Still, he stepped to the ravine mouth and waited where pale snow met dark dirt. The riders appeared first as shadows, then men. Silas Crow rode in front on a chestnut horse, heavy coat over his polished vest, snow whitening his hat brim. Behind him came 2 station hands, young, nervous, searching the rocks. Not lawmen. That mattered. Silas lifted his lantern and let the light crawl over Elias. Cold night for camping, Walker. Elias kept his hands open. Trail was worse than I thought. Silas smiled. Funny thing about trails. They hold prints, even in weather. His lantern dipped to the ground, then toward the glow inside the ravine. Saw a smaller set coming this way. Folks say an Apache girl was near the well before a bay mare went missing. Elias did not look back. A bay mare wandered loose behind your stable yesterday. I saw her. One station hand glanced aside. Silas did not. You calling me mistaken? I am saying horses know how to walk without help. Wind carried smoke between them. Silas leaned in the saddle, eyes slipping past Elias's shoulder. A corner of gray will moved near the bend. Only a breath. Enough for a man who wanted proof more than truth. His smile thinned. So that is where she is. Elias stepped between the lantern and the bend. She is sick from cold. She is wanted for questioning. By who? By folks with property to lose. Elias held his stare. That is not a badge. The station hands went quiet. Silas lowered his lantern, its warm light making his face look almost gentle, which made it worse. You always were soft, Walker. Paying for their water. Sleeping in rocks for them. Now hiding one. He raised his voice. Come on out, girl. We will sort this peaceable. Iona did not answer. Elias could hear her breathing, thin but steady. Silas's eyes narrowed. You know what people will say when they hear you spent the night in a ravine with an Apache girl wrapped in your blanket? The words were quiet, dirty with intention. Elias felt cold move through him that had nothing to do with snow. He did not step forward. He did not reach for iron. He only lowered his voice. They will say she was freezing, and I had a blanket. Silas chuckled. People do not say kind things when the truth sounds dull. Then maybe people need better tongues. For a moment, no one moved. Snow fell soft as flour from a sack. Then Iona stepped into the edge of the firelight, gray blanket around her shoulders, medicine pouch held where all could see. She stood straight, though Elias knew her strength was nearly gone. I took no horse, she said. Silas looked at her, as if her words were not worth hearing. That will be decided in town. Elias turned his head slightly. No, one word. Small as a nail. Strong as one too. Silas's face hardened. Behind him, a station hand shifted in the saddle, wishing he had stayed by the stove. Then, High along the ridge beyond the lantern light, a stone clicked and rolled into the dark. All four horses lifted their heads at once. Iona heard it too. Her eyes rose to the rim of White Ravine, and for the first time that night, hope crossed her face. The ridge went silent, and that made the fallen stone heavier. Weather could move one rock. Silence meant eyes. Silas lifted his lantern toward the rim of White Ravine, but the light found only snow, brush, and cedar roots gripping stone. His horse shifted. The station hands looked up, then away, as if not naming danger could keep it from being real. Elias felt the moment change. Not safe, just balanced. For the first time, every head had turned from Iona to the dark above. Silas forced a laugh. Coyotes. No one answered. Iona stood behind Elias, wrapped in the gray blanket, snow on her hair and lashes. Her voice did not shake. You made the horse story. Silas turned slowly. Careful, girl. Elias stepped between them. She has a name. Silas's face lost its polish. You will throw your life away over someone who would not cross the street for you in daylight. Elias heard the insult and the fear beneath it. She crossed the hills for medicine. More than most men cross for truth. One station hand glanced at Iona's pouch. Medicine. Silas snapped. Keep quiet. Lies hated questions from their own side. Iona lifted the pouch. For my brother. Fever took his strength. I came for water. Nothing else. The younger man looked down. The other avoided her eyes. Silas felt his hold slipping and reached for shame. And Walker just happened to tuck you safe in his camp all night? That what you want Coldwater to believe? Elias felt Iona stiffen. Silas was no longer after truth. He was after her dignity. Elias spoke low. I will not let you turn mercy into mud because your hands are empty of it. Silas dismounted, boots crunching in snow, lantern swinging. Move. Elias did not. No, Silas's hand hovered near his coat. Elias kept his eyes on Silas's face. You do not have law with you. You have two tired boys and a story that keeps changing. One station hand backed his horse a step. Silas heard it. Last chance, Walker. Elias removed his hat slowly. Snow touched his hair. In the lantern light, he looked worn by years of being nobody in towns that only loved men with money. I will not kill a man for lying, he said. But I will stand between his lie and the person it is trying to bury. No one breathed. Then Iona whispered in Apache. The words rose into the ravine and found the ridge. A low call answered from above. Not a war cry. A single deep note, like the mountain itself speaking. Silas froze. The station hands turned hard in their saddles. Along the rim, shapes appeared one by one, dark against the snow-gray sky. Riders. More than 10. More than 20. Silent. Still. Apache horsemen lined the ridge from cedar to cedar, blankets moving in the wind, faces unreadable. No one charged. No one shouted. They only watched. And under that watching, Silas Crow seemed to shrink inside his fine coat. Iona stepped beside Elias now, not behind him. Relief left her in one quiet breath. But the riders looked at Elias too, at his open hands, his untouched holster, and the gray blanket around their daughter. Then a woman on a dark horse moved to the center of the ridge, shawl marked with red thread, posture straight as judgment. Iona's voice broke softly on one word. Mother. Nayeli Red Willow did not hurry down from the ridge. That was how every man in White Ravine knew who she was. Lesser people rushed when they wanted fear. She moved as if the ground had already agreed to hold her. Her dark horse picked carefully through the stone path, steam rising from its nose, snow dusting its mane. Above, Apache riders stayed along the rim, silent from cedar shadow to cedar shadow, until the ravine felt like a courtroom carved by God. Elias stood near the low fire, hands open, holster still fastened, coat thin against the cold. Silas Crow had gone quiet. His two station hands looked smaller now, eyes fixed anywhere but Iona. Nayeli dismounted without help. Red thread edged her shawl. Silver caught at her wrists. Her face held the calm of someone who had survived grief without letting it bend her heart. Iona stepped toward her, then stopped, suddenly aware of the gray blanket around her shoulders. Nayeli looked at her daughter, the medicine pouch, then the wool. Her eyes paused on the blue initials. M.W. She did not ask Silas to explain. Men who build lies are always eager to talk. Nayeli gave him no floor. She spoke to Iona in Apache. Iona answered, tired but unbent. She told of the water denied, the horse lie, the ravine, the fire, the gun belt set aside, the way Elias looked away when dignity mattered more than comfort, and the blanket he gave while keeping none of its warmth. The riders listened. The snow listened. Even Silas seemed to listen, though his face fought every word. When Iona finished, Naeli looked at Elias. "You are Elias Walker." "Yes, ma'am." The old habit came easy. His mother had taught him respect, no matter what language shaped a woman's prayers. Naeli stepped closer. "Why did you not take warmth from her when the night became cruel?" Elias looked at Iona, then the dying fire. "Because she had less strength left than I did." Simple words. That was why they lasted. Naeli studied him, then reached for the blanket. Iona let it slip from her shoulders, almost reluctant. Cold touched her at once, and Elias moved to remove his coat, but Naeli lifted one hand. Not harshly, only telling him the moment had its own order. She held the blanket between her palms, damp with snow, smoke-scented, worn thin by years. Her thumb found the stitching. "Martha Walker," she said carefully. Elias's breath caught. Hearing his mother's name there folded the years together until he was 12 again, outside a closed barn with snow in his hair. "My mother," he said. Naeli nodded as if the blanket had already told her. "A mother made this to keep her son alive. Last night, that son used it to keep my daughter alive. So the blanket has done its work twice." No one moved. Naeli turned to the station hands, not with anger, but truth. "You saw the girl. You saw the pouch. You heard the man who made the story." The younger hand lowered his eyes. "The mare was behind the stable," he said. Silas snapped toward him, but the boy did not take it back. "She was never stolen." The second hand nodded, shame crossing his face. Silas opened his mouth. Nothing useful came out. Naeli did not smile. Victory did not make her cruel. She only looked at him until he ran out of places to stand inside himself. "Take your lie home," she said. "It is colder than this ravine." Silas gathered his reins with stiff fingers. The men turned away, leaving with a small sound, like a door closing on a room no one wished to enter again. When they were gone, Naeli faced Elias. She placed the blanket in his hands, but kept one corner. From beneath her shawl, she drew a strip of red cloth and tied it beside his mother's blue initials. The knot was small. The meaning was not. "By our fire," she said. "By my daughter's breath, you are my son now." Elias could not answer. His hands tightened around the blanket, and for the first time that night, the cold found no way into him. Morning came to White Ravine without asking the night's permission. The snow stopped first, then the wind, then the last hiss of the fire as a red coal folded into ash. Gold light spilled over cedar branches, horses, weathered faces, and the gray blanket in Elias Walker's hands. The red strip Naeli had tied beside his mother's blue initials moved softly in the dawn, two colors from two worlds that had been told too long they could not share warmth. Iona stood beside her mother now, wrapped in a fresh shawl, the medicine pouch still held to her chest. She looked stronger, though the night had not fully left her. Nights like that never did. Naeli touched her daughter's cheek and nodded toward the eastern wash. "Your brother waits." Iona looked at Elias, searching for words too large for English. Elias understood and tipped his hat. "Ride safe." She stepped closer and placed his tin cup back in his hand. "He will know your name," she said. "My brother." Elias looked at the dented cup. "Make sure he knows his sister crossed a hard night for him." Iona smiled, small as sunlight on water, then mounted behind one of the riders. Before they left, Naeli faced Elias once more. No ceremony, no grand speech, only a mother's steady judgment. "When you pass Red Willow Camp," she said, "you will not pass as a stranger." Elias held the blanket to his chest. "I do not know that I have ever passed anywhere else." Naeli did not pity him. She only nodded. "Then come where your name is already known." The riders climbed from the ravine one by one, hooves careful on snow-damp stone, until morning swallowed them in red light. Iona looked back once. Elias lifted his hand. Then she was gone. For a while, he stood beside the dead fire, listening as the ravine returned to itself. Moses nudged his shoulder, hunting for oats, and Elias laughed softly, surprised by the sound. He packed slowly, lantern, gun belt, coffee, flour. The blanket he rolled last. But he did not tie it behind the saddle anymore. He folded it with the blue initials facing inward, the red cloth facing out, and laid it across the front where he could see it as he rode. By the time he reached Coldwater, Silas Crow's lie had collapsed. The bay mare had been found behind the stable, nosing at a broken oat bin. The younger station hand had spoken, then the other. Then a woman from the dry goods store remembered Iona turned away from the well with an empty water skin. Nobody apologized all at once. Towns are slow creatures when shame is involved. They looked from windows. They stepped aside on the boardwalk. Silas did not come out, and Elias did not go looking for him. That was not the justice his mother had taught him. He stopped at the public well, filled 2 buckets, and set one where any traveler could reach it without asking. Then he rode west. Not richer, not safer, not important by any town's measure. But the blanket before him carried 2 mothers now. One who had kept him alive through a winter that took her voice. One who had found him in a cold ravine and gave that voice back with a single word. Out in the wide country, where dust could bury names and fear could turn neighbors into strangers, Elias Walker learned that a man is not always claimed by blood. Sometimes he is claimed by the warmth he gives away when he has almost none left. And from that morning on, whenever the wind cut sharp and the trail ran lonely, he touched the red cloth beside the blue stitches and remembered that somewhere beyond the red hills, an Apache